stupid, dumb girl apologized to Kyungo and told him that she wanted to end things there. Her words came abruptly, and they left Kyungo visibly shaken. He had not expected her decision to be so firm. She reminded him that she had already mentioned this before, that she had gone on a blind date recently. Kyungo silently acknowledged it, knowing that she was right. She then explained that the blind date had happened because a sister had begged her repeatedly for help, and at first, she had been very reluctant to go. Lowering her voice, she instructed Kyungo to do the same, warning him that people around them were listening. She admitted that her mood had been unpleasant in the beginning, but the man she met turned out to be much better than she had expected. Despite being the CEO of a venture company, he was surprisingly easygoing, approachable, and matched her energy well. She went on to say that they would soon be entering their 4th year next year and that it was time for her to prepare for the future. They could not continue dating like careless kids forever. For that reason, she told Kyungo that he needed to stop clinging to the past and pull himself together. She believed that this separation would ultimately help him mature. Kyungo stood there, lost in his thoughts, until her voice called him back to reality. He snapped out of it and apologized, saying he was just a little flustered. After saying everything she wanted to say, the girl told him that she wanted to hear his final words. Kyungo responded calmly that if she was determined to leave, he would no longer try to stop her. However, after a moment of hesitation, he asked if they could do one last thing together. Confused by his request, the girl asked what he meant. Kyungo explained that he wanted them to do their cardio training together one last time, as a kind of farewell gift. At this, the girl stood up from her seat. Looking at him with pity, she thought that Kyungo would remain miserable until the very end. Turning away in anger, she left as Kyungo tried to call her back. Overcome with frustration, Kyungo slammed the table down, startling the waitress and drawing worried glances from nearby customers. He was consumed by bitterness as he thought about how he had worked tirelessly at his part-time job just to buy her an anniversary gift, only to be repaid with a breakup. In his anger, he cursed her and bitterly wished her good luck with her CEO boyfriend, vowing to erase her from his mind at the speed of light. At that moment, he imagined her clinging to him, stopping him from drinking any more alcohol. In his imagination, he replied that he would stop once he finished his food. When reality returned, he bit his lip hard, overwhelmed by both anger and sorrow, realizing just how much he missed her. As he continued drinking, he muttered curses, wishing that his friend would not arrive yet. Suddenly, someone grabbed him tightly from behind by the neck, causing him to spill his drink. The girl scolded him sharply for calling a busy person to come here, yet at the same time dared him to drink more. Kyungo shot back that she was not busy at all. In fact, she was the most idle person in the world. His remark only made her angrier, and she began teasing him loudly, drawing the attention of everyone around them. This girl was Min Songa, Kyungo's friend. She was a freshman who had entered the Western painting department in the academic year 2017. Kyungo had first met her at a freshman party. She had been beautiful, bright, and confident with a striking figure. While most of the others at the party tried to use alcohol to create chaos, Songa stood out. Thanks to Kyungo's high alcohol tolerance from high school, he ended up competing with her in a drinking contest. One by one, all the boys lost, until only one remained, Kyungo himself. When another boy pointed toward him, Songa greeted him bluntly by calling him a bastard. In response, Kyungo calmly introduced himself. She immediately challenged him to a duel, declaring that whoever passed out first would be the loser. Kyungo refused the challenge, but from that day onward, the two of them became drinking buddies. As they clinked their glasses now, Sing loudly declared that she had already warned Kyungo about his ex-girlfriend, that the girl was just a player and had never truly been interested in him. She spoke so loudly that everyone nearby turned to stare, her voice echoing through the room. Song reprimanded Kyungo harshly, reminding him that he should have listened to her advice earlier. Instead, he had always acted according to his own wishes, and in the end, he had been betrayed by his ex-girlfriend. Kyungo, already irritated, told Song to lower her voice. Rather than calming down, Song grew louder. She deliberately drew the attention of everyone in the pub and openly announced that Kyungo was nothing more than an idiot who had been dumped by a girl, mocking him and telling the crowd to look at his foolish face. Enraged, Kyungo shouted at Sung to stop her childish behavior. Their argument continued to escalate until a waiter approached Kyungo and politely asked him to leave, explaining that the disturbance was affecting other customers. After a brief pause, both Sung and Kyungo exited the pub together. Outside, Kyungo complained that because of Sung, he had not even managed to get properly drunk. Song, on the other hand, confidently insisted that he had not drunk as much as he wanted anyway. Suddenly, she placed her hand on his shoulder and casually suggested that they continue drinking at her place. Kyouongo hesitated at first, eventually agreed. They went to Song's house and continued drinking. By the time they finished nearly 10 bottles, Song admitted that she was finally starting to feel drunk. Kyouongo scolded her, rudely telling her to mind her manners and claiming that her behavior was the reason she did not have a boyfriend. Song, however, responded with confidence, stating that many men liked her and that Kyouongo could not understand such things because he was still bitter over being dumped. Kyouongo lost his temper and threatened her, but moments later, he smiled and dismissed his own anger, saying that alcohol made people forget things easily. He then made a bet, declaring that Song would remain single until graduation. Song shrugged and replied that it did not matter anyway, and that there was no point arguing over it. Hearing this, Kyouongo burst into laughter. Song remarked that the two of them always became overly excited whenever they talked about their weapons, referring to their sharp words. Kyouongo sighed and muttered that perhaps women behaved this way too, claiming that all women were the same. He bitterly spoke about his ex-girlfriend who had abandoned a 3-year relationship simply because she wanted to act like a CEO. To him, this proved that all women were alike. Song immediately shouted back, arguing that not all women were the same. Just because his ex-girlfriend was manipulative did not mean everyone else was. Kyouongo refused to accept this. Sung angrily insisted that his thinking was wrong, stating that men were often attracted to women simply because they felt happiness and excitement around them, not because of deep emotions. As Kyouongo continued to deny her words, Sung suddenly pulled him closer and challenged him, proposing a bet about who would get excited first. Kyouongo remained silent for a moment before loudly demanding a prize, 50,000 won and bread. This led to a chaotic wrestling match between them. The next morning, Kyouongo's alarm rang loudly at 9 o'clock. He panicked when he realized he was late for class. While rushing out, he thought about how he was always late for Professor Cha Do-yeon's lectures and feared that missing another class would surely result in failure. Lost in his thoughts, he collided with a girl, causing her to fall as her books scattered across the ground. Kyouongo immediately apologized, though he became flustered when his gaze accidentally dropped toward her skirt. The girl also apologized and asked if he was all right. Kyouongo offered to help her, but she politely declined. At that moment, Sung arrived and walked past him without saying a word. Kyouongo quickly helped the girl anyway and called out to Sung. When she did not stop, his frustration grew. Eventually, Sung halted, clearly annoyed, and said they needed to talk. Kyouongo replied that he had to attend class and added that his legs still hurt from the previous night. Sung showed concern for his condition, appearing conflicted and confused about what had happened between them. Kyouongo felt a creeping suspicion settle in her mind, as though the girl outside truly did not remember something important. Before she could dwell on the thought, the faint sound of approaching footsteps reached her ears. Two voices echoed down the hallway, growing clearer with every step. Reacting on instinct, Kyouongo immediately pulled back into the shadows, hiding herself without hesitation. Sung followed her a second later, tucking herself into the same concealed space just as a boy and a girl entered the clubroom. The girl hesitated near the doorway, her eyes scanning the room as unease flickered across her face. She whispered that she was not entirely sure whether someone might already be inside. The boy, however, dismissed her worries with casual confidence, gesturing around the empty space and explaining that the club room was almost always deserted at that hour. Even so, the girl's nervousness did not fade easily. She voiced her fear that someone could arrive at any moment. The boy reassured her again, telling her not to worry and urging her to relax. Meanwhile, hidden from sight, Kyouongo remained tense and confused, silently questioning why they were hiding in the first place. When she glanced at Sung for an explanation, Sung responded lightly that Kyouongo had hidden first, and she had simply followed along without much thought. Outside their hiding place, the boy and the girl soon immersed themselves in their workout, their playful wrestling turning the quiet room into a scene of lively movement and exertion. Time passed as they trained together, seemingly unaware of the silent observers nearby. Once they finished, the boy casually suggested going out for a drink after class, his tone hopeful. The girl declined without hesitation, explaining that she already had plans and was meeting a friend for a date. From within the shadows, Sung let out a quiet laugh, muttering that the boy was nothing more than a convenient tool for cardio. Kyouongo, overhearing everything, clenched her fists and cursed them under her breath, irritation simmering as she remained hidden, watching the scene unfold in unwanted silence. Kyouongo once again brought up what had happened the previous night, but the mention only irritated Sung further. She turned away sharply and reminded him that she had an important class to attend, clearly unwilling to continue the discussion. The moment Kyouongo heard this, panic seized him. He suddenly realized the seriousness of his situation and bolted off like a madman, fully aware that he was heading straight toward major trouble. Later that evening, Kyouongo was sitting at a bar called Da Beer, drinking heavily alongside his male friend. His friend tried to comfort him, casually saying that failing one subject was not the end of the world and that no one died just because they received an F grade. However, Kyouongo, already frustrated and overwhelmed, shouted at him to shut up. He snapped that his friend could never understand his feelings, especially since he was someone who failed so often that grade meant nothing to him anymore. Offended, but still joking, the friend told Kyouongo not to attack him with such brutal honesty. Despite the tension, the friend claimed he had a solution to avoid failing the subject. Lowering his voice as if sharing a dangerous secret, he mentioned that he had heard rumors about Professor Cha Doyan, the same professor who had failed him before. According to the gossip, she was extremely dissolute. He added that Kyouongo must have heard of Jongseok-hyung, a fourth-year student who had skipped most of his classes to prepare for a competition. Supposedly, Jongseok had slept with Professor Cha Doyan and, as a result, managed to secure a B+ grade. Kyouongo stared at him in disbelief, his expression clearly showing shock. The friend smirked, saying he knew Kyouongo would be surprised. However, Kyouongo quickly shot back, saying that he was not amazed by the story itself, but by his friend's sheer foolishness. Mockingly, he remarked that his friend sounded like a primary school student who believed every ridiculous rumor he heard. The friend, offended by the insult, shouted that he was telling the truth and insisted that the story was real. At that moment, a girl approached their table. She cheerfully called out the friend's name. Gyungho greeted him. Kyouongo assumed she was there to drink, and she confirmed this, adding that she had come with her own group of friends. Soon after, her friends called her from a distance, and she waved at Kyouongo and Gyungho, signaling that she would join them later. Kyouongo watched her leave and felt that her presence briefly shifted the atmosphere, making it calmer compared to the chaos he had been trapped in all evening. He wondered if the girl had panicked upon recognizing him, since she was the same girl he and Sung had seen earlier in the club room, doing cardio training with another guy. Meanwhile, Gyungho looked concerned about her and openly admitted that she was exactly his type. He introduced her as Kyouongo, speaking her name with obvious admiration. Kyouongo silently labeled Gyungho as innocent on the surface, but pitiful underneath, convinced that his friend suffered from severe delusions. Gyungho then casually added that, although Sung suited his personal taste more in terms of appearance, her personality had completely disappointed him. Hearing Sung's name spoken so lightly was enough to snap Kyungo's patience. He abruptly stood up, calling Gyungho annoying. Surprised by the sudden change, Gyungho stared at him in confusion. With a darkened expression, Kyouongo announced that he was going to the washroom. Gyungho grew uneasy, almost terrified, by how serious Kyouongo suddenly looked. Kyungo's mood had already been ruined, but hearing Sung's name had completely pushed him over the edge. Near the washroom, Kyouongo unexpectedly ran into Kyouongo. Trying to act normal, he told her that no one was inside and that she could use it if she wanted. However, she calmly replied that she was actually waiting for him. Her response left Kyouongo confused. Then, she bluntly asked whether he and Sung had seen her training with a guy in the club room earlier. Kyouongo was startled and immediately denied it. Kyouongo smirked and pointed out that he was only pretending, since he had been hiding inside the cabinet at the time. After hesitating for a moment, Kyouongo assured her that he would not tell anyone and promised to keep it a secret. Kyouongo stopped him, saying she was not finished talking yet. She confessed that she had been confused by what Kyouongo and Sung were doing there and jokingly suspected that they might have been having some kind of wrestling match. With a mischievous smile, she assured him that she would also keep the incident a secret, but only on one condition. She wanted Kyouongo to do cardio training with her right then and there. Kyouongo was stunned, especially because he knew she was dating Nam Wook. However, before he could ask for any explanation or protest further, she had already pulled him along. Without another word, the two of them began their unexpected workout session, leaving Kyouongo even more unsettled than before. After finishing their session, they stepped out of the washroom together. Kyouongo calmly assured Kyouongo that she would not tell Sung anything about what had happened. Her confidence caught Kyouongo off guard, and he stared at her in surprise, unsure of how to react to such certainty. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Sung was lying alone on her bed, lost in her thoughts and preparing to rest. At that very moment, Kyouongo arrived at her place. Sung immediately tried to stop him from coming any closer, telling him that she was about to sleep and asking him to leave. However, Kyouongo insisted that he needed just 1 second. Before she could respond, he grabbed her gently by the shoulder and suddenly confessed that he had a crush on her. Song froze in shock, then hesitated before accusing him of going crazy and treating his words as a joke. She told him not to fool around like that. Kyouongo felt deeply hurt by her reaction, saddened by the realization that his feelings were being dismissed so casually. Soon after, the scene shifted as both of them were seen training together, pushing themselves through intense cardio exercises. Everything felt strangely vivid and emotional, until Sing abruptly woke up. She realized it had all been a dream. Her heart raced as reality settled in. Just then, doorbell rang. When Sing opened the door, she found Kyouongo standing there. His sudden arrival late at night immediately worried her, especially because a strong smell of alcohol surrounded him. Kyouongo explained that he had been out drinking with a casual friend and had gotten drunk without realizing how late it was. He added that he had come only to apologize for what happened the previous day, insisting that he remembered everything clearly. Before he could say more, Sung punched him hard on the chest. Even as he continued apologizing, she grew more irritated, questioning why he would put himself in such a pathetic state just to say something so pointless. Suddenly, Kyouongo began to feel sick. Without warning, he vomited on Sung and then fainted right in front of her. Struggling with both anger and exhaustion, Sung somehow managed to drag him to the bed and threw him onto it. She let out a frustrated sigh, muttering that he had come all the way to her house only to puke and pass out. After that chaotic night, the two of them unknowingly began another silent battle, this time an unspoken emotional wrestling match that neither of them was ready to confront. The next morning at school, Kyouongo walked through the campus with his head down, replaying the events of the previous night in his mind. He had gone to apologize, yet everything had only worsened. The thought of facing Sung that day made his chest tighten with anxiety. Just then, Kyouongo approached him and greeted him warmly, expressing concern about whether Kyouongo had made it home safely the night before. Kyouongo responded sharply, his face aggressive and his tone cold, stating that he had returned safely and telling Kyouongo not to worry. Kyouongo then casually mentioned that their planned trip was still happening, adding that he assumed Kyouongo would not be able to join this time. That comment irritated and confused Kyouongo. He questioned how Kyouongo could decide something like that on his behalf. Smiling knowingly, Kyouongo reminded him that he had dropped Miss Cha Do-yeon's class and had already been kicked out of the house. The realization struck Kyouongo hard. This was far more serious than he had thought. Later, Kyouongo stood nervously outside the professor's office, unsure of what to do next. After a moment of panic, he decided that he would kneel down and beg if necessary. When he knocked on the door, there was no immediate response. After a brief pause, the professor finally allowed him to enter. Inside, he saw Cha Do-yeon seated at her desk. She looked visibly confused by his sudden appearance, especially remembering his visit to her home earlier. With a tense expression, Kyouongo admitted that he had missed her classes and received an F in her subject. In a sharp, emotionless tone, she replied that there was nothing she could do about it. Hesitantly, Kyouongo suggested that there might still be some way to fix the situation. Curiosity flickered across her face as she asked what he had in mind. Gathering his courage, Kyouongo boldly declared that he was willing to do anything she asked, as long as he could erase the F from her subject. His confidence made Cha Do-yeon pause and think. She finally replied that they would do exactly what he was capable of doing. Kyouongo immediately agreed again, repeating that he would do anything necessary to restore his grade. For a moment, Do-yeon remained silent. Then she stepped closer to him and placed her hand against his chest, asking if he truly understood what she was implying. Kyouongo, flustered but trying to remain composed, replied that he assumed she would assign him extra work or additional assignments. Suddenly, Do-yeon grabbed his weapon, causing him to flinch in shock. She then stepped back, leaving Kyouongo frozen in place, lost in confusion and overwhelmed by his own thoughts. Cha Do-yeon suddenly spoke sharply, snapping Kyouongo out of his thoughts. She warned him not to space out and instructed him to listen carefully. She informed him that she would call him to her office the following week, and only then would she explain what he would have to do for her. Startled, Kyouongo immediately apologized and agreed without hesitation. He bowed deeply in front of her, expressing his gratitude with genuine urgency before leaving the office. As he walked down the hallway, Kyouongo silently scolded himself for speaking so recklessly to the professor. His mind replayed every word he had said, and embarrassment washed over him as he realized how foolish he must have sounded. Lost in these thoughts, he suddenly looked up, and there she was. Sung stood right in front of him. For a brief moment, both of them froze, their eyes meeting without either knowing how to react. The air between them felt heavy and uncomfortable. Breaking the silence, Kyouongo hesitantly mentioned that she must be there for an assignment. Sung paused, then nodded in agreement, confirming that she had come for the same reason. Relief flickered across Kungo's face, and he quickly added, almost too cheerfully, that he was also heading there for an assignment. With an awkward smile, he remarked that it might turn out to be exciting for the both of them. However, Sung did not respond. She continued walking quietly beside him, her expression unreadable. Kungo noticed her silence and immediately assumed that she was still angry with him. In his mind, it seemed only natural, especially after what had happened between them in the bathroom. The thought made him uneasy, and guilt slowly crept in. On the other hand, Sung was lost in her own thoughts. She found the situation painfully awkward and wished she had not run into him at all. Walking beside Kungo made her heart feel restless, and she avoided looking at him, hoping the moment would pass quickly. As evening fell, Kungo found himself alone, sitting quietly with his sketchbook open. His pencil moved slowly across the page as he began to sketch, but his mind remained distracted. Unspoken emotions, regret, and unresolved tension lingered in his thoughts, making every line he drew heavier than the last. Kungo sat at his desk with a deep frown creasing his forehead. For 5 straight hours, his pencil had hovered uselessly over the page, yet he hadn't managed to draw a single meaningful line. His thoughts were tangled, his focus slipping further away by the minute. With a weary sigh, he glanced towards Sung, who was quietly immersed in her own work. He knew he couldn't keep going like this, trapped in frustration and silence. Gathering his courage, he decided it was time to start a conversation. He stood up, walked over to her, and in an awkward tone admitted that he was feeling hungry and was about to grab something to eat. He added, hesitantly, that if Sung was hungry too, she could join him. Before Sung could even respond, Kyouongo suddenly appeared at Kungo's side and grabbed his arm with surprising enthusiasm. She declared that they should all go eat together, explaining that she had been starving all day after rushing from one class to another without a proper break. With a bright grin, she called out to Sung as well, announcing that she would be treating them both today. Sung smiled politely at the offer, but replied that she still had work to finish, telling them to go ahead and enjoy the food without her. Kyouongo waved cheerfully, saying goodbye as Sung wished them a pleasant meal. Kungo, however, lingered for a moment, clearly unsure. Just as he was about to leave, Sung finally set her pencil down and admitted that she, too, couldn't concentrate on her drawing anymore because she was actually feeling quite hungry. Her quiet confession caught Kungo off guard, but it also made him feel strangely relieved. Later that night, Kungo and Kyouongo walked side by side down the street after finishing their meal. Kyouongo excitedly praised how delicious the food had been, laughing about how worth the trip it was. Kungo, on the other hand, felt a little uncomfortable. He was bothered that Kyouongo hadn't allowed him to pay the bill. When he mentioned it, Kyouongo brushed it off casually, saying that since she was the one who had offered the treat, it was only natural that she paid. After some time, Kungo announced that he had to leave because he had something important to take care of. But Kyouongo stopped him, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. She urged him to come along with her, promising to show him something fun and unexpected. Intrigued and slightly confused, Kungo followed as she led him through a narrow, dimly lit street. He asked what exactly she wanted to show him, and Kyouongo simply pointed ahead. There, in the shadows, he noticed a couple doing cardio training outside, pushing themselves through their workout despite the late hour. The sight surprised him. Kyouongo explained that the area was quiet, with hardly any lights or people around, making it the perfect place for intense training. Then, without warning, she began taking off her outer clothes, announcing boldly that they were going to train just like that as well. Kungo's eyes widened in shock. He protested that he wasn't comfortable doing something like that out in the open. At that moment, a sudden noise made them both flinch, but when they looked closer, they realized it was only a stray cat darting across the street. Kyouongo let out a disappointed sigh and explained that plenty of boys would gladly train with her anytime she wanted, so Kungo shouldn't assume she was acting desperate. Still, her words left Kungo wondering if this kind of boldness was simply normal for someone like her. Kyouongo then admitted that she only behaved this way around Kungo because she couldn't forget the day they had secretly trained together in the bathroom. That memory, she confessed, stayed with her, and it was the reason she wanted to recreate that same feeling again. Hearing this, Kungo finally understood that Kyouongo had planned this moment from the very beginning. Kyouongo nodded, confirming his realization with a confident smile. And so, beneath the quiet night sky, the two of them began their intense workout session together, pushing each other forward with determination and a shared sense of excitement that neither of them had expected to feel again. Sung remained seated in her chair, her shoulders slumping as she let out a long, exhausted sigh. The day had drained her, and the emptiness in her stomach only made her irritation worse. Hunger gnawed at her patience, and after a moment of thought, she decided it was time to head home. As she stood and walked toward Kyouongo's chair, something unusual caught her eye. He had left behind a small cartoon sketch on his desk, an exaggerated, playful drawing that looked more like the work of an elementary school child than that of a serious athlete. Sung frowned at it, muttering under her breath that he really was like a kid sometimes. She couldn't help but feel annoyed. After all, she hadn't eaten anything all day, and this silly drawing was the last thing she wanted to see. At first, she assumed Kyouongo had already gone home and dismissed the matter as none of her concern. But then, a strange feeling of unease crept over her. What if he had forgotten something important? Acting on that instinct, she pulled out her phone and sent him a quick message, letting him know that he had left his bag behind in the classroom. Almost immediately, she heard the sharp sound of a notification echoing from nearby. Confused, Sung looked around and realized that the sound was coming from Kyouongo's own phone, which was lying on his chair. She stared at it, puzzled. Why would he leave without his phone? To Sung, that made no sense. There was hardly anything more important than a mobile phone in today's world. The fact that he had left both his bag and his phone behind struck her as incredibly strange. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Kyouongo and Kyouongo were deeply absorbed in their training session. Their focus was suddenly broken when a watchman approached them with a stern expression. The guard's eyes immediately fell on Kyouongo, who was in the middle of adjusting his pants. Startled, Kyouongo blurted out that he had been in such a hurry because he urgently needed to use the restroom. He quickly added that, as a respectable citizen, he would never relieve himself in public and was simply trying to find the nearest bathroom. The watchman scolded him regardless, warning that no matter how desperate the situation was, he should never behave that way in an open area. Embarrassed, Kyouongo bowed politely and apologized, promising that he would be more careful next time. All the while, Kyouongo had been hiding nervously behind a large box, trying not to be seen. Once the watchman finally left, muttering that Kyouongo was out of his mind, Kyouongo called out to her and told her it was safe to come out. As she stepped forward and started getting dressed, Kyouongo admitted that she had been certain they were going to get caught. She said they were lucky that the situation hadn't escalated any further. Kyouongo scratched the back of his head, clearly worried about what might have happened if they had actually been discovered. Kyouongo simply shrugged and replied that no one could know for sure, but her teasing tone only made Kyouongo more flustered. He silently told himself that he needed to be more careful around her in the future, realizing that she was far more cunning than she appeared. Later, while walking through the crowd outside, Kyouongo tried to clear his mind. He reminded himself that he shouldn't get distracted or carried away by Kyouongo and that he needed to stay focused on his responsibilities. It was then that he suddenly remembered he had left his bag back in the department. Deciding he would retrieve it the next day, he continued on his way home. When Kyouongo finally reached his house, he noticed something odd right away. The lights were still on. Curious, he stepped inside and froze in surprise. Sung was lying on his sleep. Beside her was his missing bag. Realizing that she must have brought it for him, Kyouongo quietly approached. At that moment, Sung stirred and opened her eyes, immediately complaining about how late he had arrived. Kyouongo explained that something unexpected had come up, and that was why he was delayed. He added that if she had come all the way to return his bag, she could have just called him. He would have picked it up himself. Sung pointed out that his phone was actually inside the bag, which made Kyouongo even more stunned. She then scolded him, telling him to get his life together and start acting like a real man instead of being so careless. Kyouongo didn't quite understand why she was so upset, but he listened quietly. Trying to lighten the mood, Kyouongo suggested they go out for a drink together if she was up for it. However, Sung declined, saying that she was far too exhausted to go anywhere. With that, the tension in the room settled into an uneasy silence, leaving Kyouongo reflecting on the day's strange events and his own mistakes. Kyouongo sat down on the bench, quietly thinking that Sung was still angry with him. The tension between them had not faded, and he could feel it weighing on his mind. Just then, Sung walked over to him as if nothing had happened and casually asked what flavor of alcohol he had brought. She studied him for a moment and remarked that he looked different today. In her mind, she recalled how miserable he had looked the last time he was dumped, drunk, heartbroken, and unable to pull himself together. She had been surprised at how quickly he had managed to recover afterward. Her teasing irritated Kyouongo, and he snapped at her, telling her to stay quiet and never bring up that subject again. He insisted that she should simply pretend he had never been in a relationship at all. Sung laughed at his reaction and mockingly replied that it wasn't that he had never been in a relationship, it was that she herself never could. Her words only encouraged Kyouongo's stubborn pride, and he smirked, claiming that there was probably no boy who would ever want her. Sung challenged him, asking if he thought she looked that unattractive as a woman. Kyouongo glanced at her face and, despite feeling shy, admitted to himself that she was actually pretty. However, embarrassed by his own thoughts, he brushed it off and told her not to take his words seriously because it made him feel awkward and cringe. He wondered why this whole conversation had suddenly turned into such an uncomfortable situation. Without warning, Sung demanded that Kyouongo give her 1,000 won. Confused, he asked why she wanted money. Sung explained that they had made a bet earlier and that she had won, so he owed her the amount. Kyouongo claimed he didn't remember any such bet. Frustrated, Sung ran toward him, grabbed his hair, and yelled that she had known he would try to avoid paying. She insisted that he hand over the 1,000 won immediately. When he continued denying it, Sung began checking his pockets herself, searching for any money he might have. She smiled mischievously and pointed out that he looked extremely flustered, which only proved she was right. Kyouongo suddenly became nervous and excited at the same time, realizing how close she was. Sensing his reaction, Sung stood up and announced that she was leaving. Before she could go, Kyouongo grabbed her hand and pinned her down, reminding her that he had already warned her to stop teasing him. Despite the tension, the two of them ended up starting their cardio training session together. Afterward, Sung finished her shower and stepped outside, looking around for Kyouongo. Instead of finding him, she discovered a small note he had left behind. In it, Kyouongo had written that she should make herself comfortable because he would simply sleep somewhere else. The gesture left Sung thoughtful. The next morning at the university, Kyouongo found himself worrying about how he would face Sung in class. He knew he couldn't skip that lecture because it was far too important. While he was lost in his thoughts, Sung approached him and calmly told him to make some time for her after class. Kyouongo agreed, though he did so with clear hesitation. Later that evening, as he walked across campus, Kyouongo checked his phone and read Sung's message, asking him to meet her at the basketball court. He wondered what she wanted to talk about and started imagining different possibilities. At first, he feared that Sung might tell him she no longer wanted to be friends. However, the reality turned out to be quite different. Instead of pushing him away, Sung asked him out on a date, leaving Kyouongo completely surprised and unsure how to respond. He quickly brushed the thought aside, reminding himself that such behavior went completely against her usual personality. For a brief moment, he wondered if she might have appreciated what happened the previous day and had approached him with the idea of making him her cardio partner. The notion felt strange and unrealistic, and he dismissed it almost immediately, scolding himself for overthinking. When Sung eventually approached him, she casually invited him to play a match with her, which left Kyouongo visibly confused. It took him a moment to realize that she was referring to a basketball game. Once that became clear, the two of them started playing. The match progressed quickly, and Kyouongo pushed himself harder than usual. Midway through the game, his ankle twisted unexpectedly, sending him crashing to the ground. As he struggled to recover, Sung calmly informed him that she only needed 5 more points to win. Completely out of breath and feeling as though his lungs were on the verge of giving out, Kyouongo protested that he could not continue. He dramatically complained that he would practically die if he kept running. Instead of responding with sympathy, Sung suddenly tossed a soft drink can directly at his face. The impact caused the liquid to spill, leaving his forehead drenched. Without a hint of concern, she remarked that she had enjoyed the basketball match. As for whatever had happened the day before, she told him to forget it entirely, explaining that she had already wiped it from her mind. With that, she turned and walked away. Annoyed and still lying on the ground, Kyouongo muttered that he did not care anyway. Once she was gone, he picked up the can she had thrown at him and opened it, only to realize too late it had been shaken excessively. The remaining soda splashed all over his face, prompting him to shout that Sung was clearly trying to kill him. At that exact moment, his phone rang. It was his friend Pyongsin. The moment Kyouongo answered, Pyongsin began shouting frantically, begging him to come quickly and save him because he was in serious trouble. The urgency in his voice startled Kyouongo, leaving him no choice but to head over immediately. When Kyouongo arrived, Pyongsin quickly pulled him inside without offering any explanation. Kyouongo attempted to ask what was going on, but his friend silenced him almost instantly. 2 girls were standing nearby, waiting. Pyongsin apologized to them for the long delay and then enthusiastically introduced Kyouongo. He claimed that despite his unimpressive appearance, Kyouongo was actually their ace, far more talented than he looked, better than anyone else. Completely bewildered, Kyouongo listened as Pyongsin confessed that he had been trying to impress the girls, but things fell apart when Namewook suddenly received a call from his girlfriend and ran off. Realizing he had been dragged into an awkward situation, Kyouongo grew irritated and announced that he was leaving. Pyongsin desperately tried to stop him, but before he could escape, one of the girls grabbed Kyungo's hand and insisted that since he was already there, They might as well have some fun. Though hesitant, Kungo reluctantly agreed. Soon, they were dancing together in the noisy atmosphere. As the girl moved closer than he was comfortable with, Kungo awkwardly told her not to stand so near. He explained that because she was sticking so close, he was sweating heavily. The loud music drowned out his words, confusing her. Raising his voice, Kungo clarified that he had just finished playing basketball, which was why his body was covered in sweat. Instead of being put off, the girl hugged him and said she liked the smell of a man's sweat. Her response left Kungo flustered and unsure of how to react. She then suggested that they leave together. Eventually, they arrived at a motel. The girl went to take a shower and later apologized for keeping him waiting so long. Kungo mentioned that he planned to shower as well, but she stopped him by grabbing his hand. With a playful, mischievous smile, she reminded him that she had already said she liked the smell of sweat. Leaning closer, she brought her nose near his body and inhaled deeply, praising the scent as pleasant. Kungo could only think that she was incredibly strange for finding something like that appealing. Forcing an awkward smile, he said he felt too hot and suggested turning on the air conditioner. She replied that she had deliberately turned it off because she did not want the scent to disappear. She began removing his shirt and invited him to lie down. What followed felt more like a chaotic wrestling match than anything else. In the middle of it all, Kungo froze when the girl casually revealed that she had liked him back in high school. He was stunned, realizing he had never noticed. She reminded him of a time when he had scolded her for getting a question wrong, even after he had already taught her. She also recalled shyly calling him Oppa while asking about the name of his perfume. The realization left Kungo speechless, as memories he had long forgotten suddenly came rushing back. Kungo's irritation flared instantly at her careless tone. His expression hardened as he sharply reminded her to address him properly and call him teacher. He added, almost defensively, that he was not wearing any perfume. He began to lecture her about speaking carelessly and crossing lines, but his words faltered midway when she suddenly leaned closer. Before he could react, she casually sniffed his shoulder and remarked that he smelled surprisingly good, even asking what shampoo he used. Startled and flustered, Kungo flicked her forehead with his fingers and scolded her, telling her to focus on her work instead of saying nonsense, or she would end up getting reprimanded. She immediately complained about the pain, rubbing her forehead with exaggerated drama. Back in the present, she smiled softly and commented that he still smelled just as good as before. Kungo called her by her full name, Hiju, and told her to get dressed, which caught her completely off guard. Calmly but firmly, he said he would take her home. Hiju protested, insisting that they had already done everything they needed to, and that it was far too late to worry about such things now. However, Kungo's expression turned serious as he replied that if he had known from the beginning that she was Hiju, he would never have come there with her at all. That was when Hiju suddenly wrapped her arms around him from behind. Calling him a liar, she accused him of pretending to be distant when he clearly was not. She boldly demanded that they do it once more, refusing to let go. With that, the two of them ended up resuming their intense cardio training yet again, their earlier tension dissolving into familiar chaos. When morning came, Kungo woke up alone. As he sat up, he noticed a note left behind. In it, Hiju had written that it was good to see him again and that next time they would meet in a different room. Holding the note, Kungo rubbed his face in disbelief, thinking that he must be losing his mind. He had spent the night with a girl he once tutored, and yet, despite his shock and guilt, he could not deny how good it had felt. At that moment, his phone buzzed. When he saw the caller's name, Cha Do-yeon, his heart skipped a beat. Panic set in instantly. She asked if he had time, and without thinking too much, he agreed. She sent him an address and told him to come to her studio. Though he accepted, Kungo felt confused by the unfamiliar location. Upon arriving, he rang the doorbell as countless thoughts raced through his head. He wondered if the professor had called him over the weekend to assign work instead of giving him grades. His imagination ran wild, picturing absurd scenarios in which Cha Do-yeon greeted him half-dressed and casually instructed him to sit down. The door finally opened, snapping him out of his thoughts. He apologized for arriving late, only to find himself even more confused when a young woman approached him. It was clearly Cha Do-yeon's studio, yet this was not the professor. The girl informed him politely that Professor Cha was on a call and told him he could go inside. As Kungo entered, he saw Cha Do-yeon speaking on the phone with the chief. She confidently stated that she understood the opportunity being offered, that she would review the details, and that she would meet the deadline. She added that she would publish the work schedule as soon as possible. Kungo bowed deeply in greeting, but she did not acknowledge him at all. He quietly placed his bag on the sofa, still unable to believe his eyes. He had never imagined that Cha Do-yeon worked in such a luxurious and refined place. The atmosphere alone was overwhelming. The young woman returned and offered him a cup of tea, explaining that it was her favorite jasmine tea and that it had a pleasant fragrance. Kyouongo accepted it gratefully, praising the soothing aroma and thanking her sincerely. He introduced himself, only for the girl to giggle and say that she already knew who he was. She introduced herself as Yeon Sora, mentioning that she currently worked as a model. Something about her felt familiar, and after a moment, Kyouongo remembered she was the woman who had bumped into him when he was rushing to attend Cha Doyeon's class. Just then, Cha Doyeon approached. Kyouongo immediately bowed again and greeted her properly. Without a word, she tossed a key toward him and instructed him to clean out a warehouse in the basement and complete the job that day. She added coolly that if he did exactly as she asked, she might reconsider his academic credits. Kyouongo agreed without hesitation. Cha Doyeon then called Sora over to attend to their work. Sora excused herself politely, leaving Kyouongo behind. He let out a quiet sigh, reassuring himself that at least he only had to clean the basement. However, just as he turned around, his breath caught. He froze when he saw Sora beginning to remove her clothes, leaving him utterly stunned. Kyouongo flinched slightly when the professor instructed him to take care of the assigned work. Though caught off guard, he nodded in agreement and made his way down to the basement without arguing. The moment he stepped inside, he realized just how chaotic the place was. Dust clung to every surface, discarded items were scattered everywhere, and the air felt heavy and neglected. Still, instead of complaining, Kyouongo clenched his fists and ignited a quiet determination within himself. He reminded himself that this task, no matter how unpleasant, was far better than failing his exams. Compared to receiving an F, cleaning a filthy basement felt like a small price to pay. With renewed resolve, he got to work. Moving with surprising speed and focus, he cleaned as if powered by some kind of superhero strength. Shelves were wiped down, clutter was organized, and the dust that had settled for years finally cleared away. Before long, the once messy basement looked almost unrecognizable. Standing back to admire his work, Kyouongo smiled proudly and announced to himself that he was finally done. He felt certain that whoever saw the room next would be genuinely surprised by the transformation. As he stepped out, Kyouongo noticed that Doyeon looked unusually tense. Around the same time, Bora arrived and immediately took note of Kyouongo's dust-covered face, her expression filling with concern. Sensing her worry, Kyouongo quickly reassured her, explaining that there had been a bit of dust inside the basement, which was why he looked so dirty. Relieved, Bora handed him her handkerchief. He accepted it with gratitude, thanking her sincerely before gently shifting the conversation toward Doyeon, whose anxious demeanor hadn't gone unnoticed. Bora explained that the professor was under a lot of pressure because the male model who was supposed to come to the studio had suddenly canceled. Now, Doyeon was scrambling to find a replacement, but according to Bora, none of the available options seemed to meet her strict requirements. Almost as if on cue, Doyeon spotted Kyouongo and called out to him sharply. Caught off guard, Kyouongo hesitantly told her that he had completed the cleaning thoroughly and that she was free to inspect the basement if she wished. Instead of responding to that, Doyeon gave him an unexpected order to take off his clothes. Startled and clearly uncomfortable, Kyouongo froze for a moment before reluctantly complying. He removed his t-shirt, unsure of what to expect next. Doyeon studied him carefully and commented on his moderately built muscles, offering genuine praise. Though she admitted she was slightly disappointed by his height, she quickly added that it wasn't a serious issue. Kyouongo laughed awkwardly, brushing off her remarks and insisting that he couldn't possibly be a model. Doyeon countered his protest with an offer. If Kyouongo agreed to model for the day, she would overlook his absence from the previous class. At first, Kyouongo felt disappointed that she was only willing to forgive one class. Sensing his irritation, Doyeon sighed and finally agreed to pretend that Kyouongo had never been absent from any of her classes at all. Taking her words seriously, Kyouongo boldly removed his pants and announced that he was ready. Doyeon, momentarily flustered, turned to Bora and apologized before asking her to guide Kyouongo instead. Bora accepted the responsibility without hesitation, reassuring Doyeon that she would handle everything properly. With that, Bora and Kyouongo began what felt like a strangely intense battle, adjusting poses and movements as he stepped into the unfamiliar role of a model. Elsewhere, Sung received a call from Jiyeon, who immediately asked about her weekend schedule. Sung replied that she would be busy working at school. Jiyeon, clearly irritated, insisted on spending time together the following week. Curious, Sung asked why it was so important. Jiyeon reminded her about the man Sung had met on her last blind date, the one who had taken a strong liking to her. Jiyeon wanted Sung to give him another chance. Sung hesitated, explaining that her schedule for the month was already packed. Jiyeon wasn't convinced. She argued that since Sung had been responsible for throwing the party where the blind date happened, it was now her responsibility to follow through. Jiyeon demanded that Sung make time, set a date, and inform her once it was done. Reluctantly, Sung agreed and Jiyeon ended the call. Later at home, Sung stood in front of her wardrobe, sifting through her clothes with growing frustration. She realized she didn't own anything suitable for a blind date and decided she would need to buy something new. Just as she was thinking this through, her phone rang again. Already irritated, Sung shouted at the caller, demanding to know who was bothering her. Expecting Jiyeon, she sighed in exasperation. But, to her surprise, it was Cheon. He told her that he had just broken up with Yeon. Concerned, Sung immediately asked for his location. That night, she arrived at a bar and found Kyouongo sitting alone, quietly drinking beer. The sight stirred memories within her. Looking back, Sung thought that perhaps she should have gone on the blind date instead of paying so much attention to Kyouongo that day. After all, he still hadn't completed his assignment, and she wanted her credits returned. Meanwhile, Kyouongo resolved to do his best, even though he struggled to fully control himself. When he moved unexpectedly, Doyeon sharply scolded him. Kyouongo quickly apologized, lowering his head in embarrassment. Bora stepped in, gently calling out to him and asking whether he felt uncomfortable. She offered to help. Adjusting her position slightly, Bora tried to ease the tension. Kyouongo admitted that he already felt a little more comfortable, grateful for her understanding and support. Kyouongo felt increasingly uneasy as the situation unfolded, finding it far more provocative than he had expected. He struggled to maintain control over his thoughts and reactions, aware that his composure was beginning to slip. Meanwhile, Doyeon noticed the subtle discomfort on Bora's face. Concerned, she approached her and gently asked whether something was wrong. Bora, hesitant but honest, explained that she was experiencing a mild cramp in her leg and needed a short break to recover. Understanding her condition, Doyeon agreed and granted her 10 minutes of rest. Bora responded with sincere gratitude, clearly relieved by Doyeon's consideration. As evening settled in and the session came to an end, Doyeon gathered both Kyouongo and Bora and praised them for their hard work. She acknowledged that they had performed exceptionally well and expressed her satisfaction with the day's results. Both Kyouongo and Bora politely thanked her, appreciative of her encouragement. Doyeon then handed some money to Kyouongo as compensation, commending his professionalism as a model. However, Kyouongo declined the payment, explaining that instead of money, he would prefer it if she could cancel his recorded absence. Doyeon let out a tired sigh and told him that the two matters were entirely separate, insisting that he accept the money. Eventually, Kyouongo agreed, thanked her sincerely, and left the studio. Later, as Kyouongo and Bora walked together down the street, Kyouongo glanced at her and felt a growing urge to apologize for his earlier shameless behavior. However, the weight of awkwardness made it difficult for him to bring the subject up. Before he could decide what to say, Bora suddenly called him out, directly addressing the tension between them. Kyouongo admitted that his actions had been intentional. Instead of reacting negatively, Bora simply smiled and suggested that they go out for a drink together, reasoning that they had both worked hard and deserved to relax. At the bar, Kyouongo sat beside Bora, his eyes widening in amazement as he took in the luxurious surroundings. It was the first time in his life he had stepped into such an expensive-looking place. Noticing his discomfort, Bora smiled reassuringly and told him not to feel pressured, explaining that the bar was not as costly as it appeared. She added that she had brought him there intentionally, so he should feel free to order whatever he liked. Kyouongo suggested that they split the bill, and Bora readily agreed. As they talked, Kyouongo laughed and admitted that he had initially assumed Bora was younger than him, which was why he had casually dropped honorifics. Bora responded playfully, saying that she would continue speaking that way until she felt closer to him. Kyouongo then mentioned that Bora was the same girl he had once accidentally bumped into at school. Bora giggled, amused that he still remembered, and revealed that she had been on her way to meet Professor Doyeon that day. She explained that Doyeon always made it a point to thoroughly explain concepts whenever she began a new project. Kyouongo reflected on their first meeting and admitted that he had thought Bora was a student because she had been carrying academic books. Bora smiled and explained that she loved drawing, which was why she studied art-related subjects in her spare time. She shared that she, intrigued, Kyouongo asked why she had never received formal training and requested to see her drawings, promising that he would not laugh. Bora teased him for becoming interested so quickly. Kyouongo apologized, blaming his sudden curiosity on the expensive drinks, which he believed had made him slightly drunk. Smiling, Bora asked whether he wanted to see her drawings immediately or another time. Eventually, Kyouongo accompanied Bora to her apartment. As he looked around her flat, he felt that the space reflected Bora's personality perfectly, as though it truly belonged to her in every sense. Just then, Bora's white cat approached them and she gently patted it, her expression softening. Bora apologized for the mess, explaining that she had not been home much lately due to her heavy workload. Kyouongo reassured her, saying that compared to his own room, her place felt more like a cozy cafe. Bora laughed and commented that Kyouongo was surprisingly good with words. Kyouongo replied hesitantly, explaining that he usually spoke whatever came to his mind without thinking too much. Sitting nervously on the couch, Bora spoke up with visible embarrassment and asked whether he was truly sure not laugh at her drawings. Kyouongo answered with quiet confidence, assuring her that he would never do such a thing. Encouraged by his response, Bora slowly handed her diary to him, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Kyouongo carefully looked through the pages, studying the artwork with sincere attention. After a moment, he remarked that the painting was beautiful. His unexpected praise left Bora stunned. Kyouongo went on to explain that even though he was still learning and did not have deep knowledge about art, he could clearly feel the emotions conveyed through her painting. He described how the forest in the artwork felt cold and isolated, creating a sense of loneliness. Yet the faint light at the end of the road appeared like a small ray of hope, struggling against the darkness. He openly expressed how much he loved the painting. As he spoke, Kyouongo noticed that Bora had begun to cry softly. Startled, he stopped mid-sentence, unsure of what he had said wrong. Bora quickly smiled through her tears and clarified that she was not upset. She explained that his polite and genuine compliment had deeply touched her. In a trembling voice, she confessed that she often felt pathetic for being a model who liked painting so much. Hearing this, Kyouongo grew visibly confused. He firmly stated that no one in their right mind would consider Bora pathetic, especially not him. He emphasized that he truly did not believe such a thing. With a bitter smile, Kyouongo then turned the criticism toward himself. He admitted that the truly pathetic person was someone who drank excessively and had recently been dumped by his ex-girlfriend, referring to himself. Bora looked at him in surprise, clearly unaware of this part of his life. Awkwardly, Kyouongo admitted that the breakup had happened just a few days earlier. Bora briefly suspected that Sung might be the ex-girlfriend he was talking about, but Kyouongo immediately denied it, clarifying that Sung was nothing more than a normal friend. Bora quietly understood and did not push the matter further. Kyouongo then apologized for his behavior earlier that morning, acknowledging that it may have made Bora uncomfortable. Bora gently reassured him, explaining that it was her first time experiencing something like that and that she had simply become nervous. She added that when the body becomes anxious, it sometimes reacts on its own without conscious control. Kyouongo listened carefully, but then admitted honestly that it was not because of tension. He awkwardly explained that skin-to-skin contact with a pretty girl like Bora could naturally cause such reactions. The moment the words left his mouth, he realized he had gone too far. Bora looked at him in confusion, asking quietly if he truly thought she was beautiful. Kyouongo hesitated, clearly flustered, but eventually nodded and admitted that she was very beautiful. The awkward tension slowly faded, and the two of them began their workout session together. After completing their exercise, Bora noticed her cat climbing onto the bed. She stood up and fed her, apologizing softly for the noise from the previous night. At that moment, Bora received a message from Kyouongo. He told her that he had seen her sleeping peacefully earlier and did not want to wake her. He added that next time they met, they should grab something to eat together. Bora smiled warmly at her phone and agreed. Meanwhile, Kyouongo sat alone, sketching quietly while thinking about Bora's words regarding her dream of getting into an art college. He felt ashamed of himself, realizing that as an art student, he had been too lazy to draw consistently. Determined to change, he resolved to pull himself together and take his passion seriously. Suddenly, his friend Pyeongsin approached and startled him. Laughing, Pyeongsin teased him, asking how someone who could never stay late in class was now sketching so seriously. Annoyed, Kyouongo scolded him for talking nonsense and told him to focus on his homework instead. Pyeongsin jokingly accused Kyouongo of skipping his medicine, claiming that his behavior was strange and frightening. His attention then shifted to Kyungo's sketch, and he grew curious and slightly uneasy about the dark tone of the drawing. In the middle of his teasing, Pyeongsin suddenly brought up a girl, which confused Kyouongo. He accused Kyouongo of pretending to be clueless and mentioned the club girl Kyouongo had spent the night with. Laughing, Pyeongsin pulled Kyungo's cheeks and jokingly claimed that he had fallen for her. Just as Kyouongo was about to respond, he noticed Sung standing nearby. Sung sharply scolded him, pointing out that throwing away assignments and going clubbing was a complete waste of tuition money. She harshly told him to wake up and face reality. Pyeongsin called out her name playfully, but Sung turned toward him with a murderous glare, her expression filled with anger. The situation was enough to make Pyeongsin uneasy and visibly nervous. Trying to mask his anxiety, He casually mentioned that he was heading to the convenience store and told Sung to let him know if she needed anything. Without hesitation, Sung asked him to bring her a banana milk. Pyeongsin readily agreed, requesting just 5 minutes before leaving. Meanwhile, Sung gently advised Kyouongo to focus more on his studies, reminding him that his graduation year was approaching fast and that he could not afford to be careless anymore. Kyouongo listened quietly and soon made his way toward a nearby restaurant. Once there, he ordered a bowl of rice soup. As he waited, his eyes wandered around the place, and to his surprise, he noticed Sung sitting alone at another table. Curious, Kyouongo approached her and asked why she was drinking by herself. Sung calmly replied that she was only having a drink to commemorate the completion of her assignment, nothing more. Before their conversation could continue, the elderly woman who owned the restaurant arrived with a warm smile. She cheerfully called out to Kyouongo, placed his order in front of him, and encouraged him to order some soju as well. However, Kyouongo politely declined her offer. Sung was genuinely surprised to see him refuse alcohol. She asked him if something was wrong, to which Kyouongo replied that he had several assignments to complete and would need to stay up late that night. Hearing this, Sung was shocked. She could hardly believe that the person sitting in front of her was the same Kyouongo she knew. She stared at him in disbelief, making a remark that implied he was acting unlike himself. Kyouongo quickly told her to stop, explaining that it was not funny at all. As he began eating, Kyouongo sincerely praised the taste of the rice soup, clearly enjoying the meal. After finishing, he prepared to leave, but Sung suddenly suggested that they have a drink together. Kyouongo declined once again, explaining that they both needed to wrap things up quickly since they had classes the next day. He reassured her that they could drink together some other time. Before leaving, Kyouongo expressed his gratitude to the old auntie for the delicious food. Watching him, Sung quietly reflected on how much Kyouongo had grown up in such a short time. Just then, the auntie approached Sung and warmly commented on the deep friendship between her and Kyouongo. She added that she would take care of Kyouongo's bill herself. This irritated Sung, who immediately shouted at Kyouongo, telling him not to pay for her food, even though he had not paid for his own order either. Later, as Kyouongo approached the school, he noticed how exhausted everyone around him looked. Determined to finish his work quickly, he tried to motivate himself despite the fatigue. At that moment, Kyouongo appeared and urgently called out to him. She clasped her hands together and expressed her gratitude to God that Kyouongo was still there. Kyouongo, surprised by her sudden appearance, asked why she was staying at school so late. Kyouongo explained that she had an art history report to complete, but her laptop refused to turn on. Feeling helpless, she asked Kyouongo for assistance. After checking the issue, Kyouongo advised her to start the laptop in safe mode and delete the last program she had installed. Following his instructions, the laptop finally began working again. Relieved and impressed, Kyouongo praised Kyouongo's intelligence, admitting that she had watched several tutorials but still failed to understand anything. Kyouongo brushed off the compliment, saying that he had only searched for the solution and fixed it accordingly. However, Kyouongo insisted that he was still smarter because he knew how to search effectively. Kyouongo replied modestly that anyone could do the same, and added that he probably knew these things because he played many games and often had to fix computer problems himself. As they continued talking, Kyouongo unconsciously stepped closer to Kyouongo, her tone softening as she looked at him with newfound admiration. Kyouongo was taken aback when Kyouongo suddenly stepped closer to him. Her expression carried a mix of concern and quiet reproach as she asked why he had not called her since the night they had spent together. She wondered aloud whether he did not miss her at all. Caught off guard, Kyouongo replied hesitantly, explaining that he had been overwhelmed with assignments, and that was why he had not been able to contact her. At that very moment, Kyouongo's computer finally powered on properly. Seeing this, Kyouongo silently offered his gratitude to God, relieved that the problem had resolved itself and that Kyouongo could now continue writing her report. However, her relief quickly turned into complaint. She accused Kyouongo of being unusually cold toward her, a remark that left him visibly confused and unsure of how to respond. Teasingly, Kyouongo went on to call him an iron-hearted guy, referencing Sung. This comment startled Kyouongo, especially when Kyouongo openly voiced her suspicion that he and Sung might be dating. Kyouongo immediately denied the accusation, insisting that there was nothing of that sort between them. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted when another girl who had been sleeping nearby complained about the noise they were making. Feeling awkward, Kyouongo clarified that he and Kyouongo were just friends. An uncomfortable silence followed, during which the mood of their workout session shifted. Both became flustered, and Gyeong remarked that it was a pity. She said things might have been more exciting if there had been a sense of crossing a line, though she added lightly that it was fine either way. Observing Kungo's tense reaction, she jokingly suggested that he might be feeling worked up. Her words triggered Kungo's imagination, and he momentarily drifted into a vivid fantasy. In it, his naked self appeared to him, boldly declaring that every girl belonged only to Kungo, and urging him not to miss such opportunities, warning that regret would follow if he hesitated. Kungo tried to reason with himself, acknowledging the thought, but his imagined self shouted back, insisting that moments like these never returned and had to be seized immediately. Gyeong, calling his name, snapped him back to reality, pulling him out of his thoughts. Shaken but composed, Kungo refocused, and the two of them resumed their workout, engaging in a playful wrestling match that carried an undercurrent of unresolved tension. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Song sat alone at a restaurant, steadily getting drunk. She declared that she had already consumed 3 bottles of wine and that this would be her last. An older auntie approached her and suggested having some soup to go along with the drinking. Instead, Song ordered 2 more bottles of soju at room temperature. She complained that by offering soup, the auntie was only encouraging her to drink more, and she insisted that if she were given soup without additional soju, she would feel disappointed. Just as Song was about to start eating the soup, her friend Hyuni arrived. Song asked whether Hyuni was heading home, and Hyuni agreed, explaining that she had finished her assignment. Song remarked suspiciously that students these days seem to have endless assignments. Hyuni then ordered enough soup for 3 or 4 people and laughed, commenting that everyone except Kungo had completely collapsed. She mentioned that she had heard he was working especially hard, which immediately piqued Sung's curiosity. Back in the classroom, Kungo and Gyeong were engaged in intense cardio training when a sudden noise startled them. A girl woke up, groggy and extremely thirsty, and opened a bottle of water. While drinking, she noticed Kungo still working and approached him, asking why he had not gone home yet. Kungo answered hesitantly that he was looking for something. The girl observed that he looked unusually determined. Kungo responded by telling her to pull herself together, adding that he intended to do the same. This comment puzzled her, as she knew Kungo to be someone who drank soju regularly, making his sudden seriousness feel strange. Unbeknownst to her, Gyeong was hiding under the computer table nearby. Sweating heavily, Kungo explained that he was still stuck on certain parts of his work. The girl noticed how much he was sweating and began to suspect that he might be watching something inappropriate. Her thoughts startled Kungo so badly that he immediately snapped his laptop shut. He raised his voice, scolding her for daring to look at her sunbathe screen and warning that he would reprimand her for such behavior. Ironically, his reaction only reinforced her suspicion that he had indeed been watching something suspicious. Yawning, the girl dismissed the situation lightly and told him to enjoy whatever suspicious content he was watching, adding that her bones were aching from exhaustion. Kungo firmly denied her assumption, insisting that she had misunderstood him completely. Unconvinced but too tired to argue, the girl said she was going to sleep for a while and asked him to wake her once he was finished. Kungo gently advised Gyeong that it would be better for her to go home and get some proper rest. He spoke calmly at first, suggesting that a good night's sleep would help clear her mind. However, instead of listening, the girl quietly lay down near him and remarked that it felt easier for her to fall asleep right there, rather than going anywhere else. Her casual response immediately made Kungo uncomfortable. He scolded Gyeong, telling her firmly to stop behaving that way and to take his words seriously. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, Sing was walking toward the classroom with a few drinks in her hands. As she moved through the corridor, she muttered to herself, internally cursing Kungo for not taking proper care of himself and skipping meals again. She knew that once Kungo had decided to work overnight, there was little she could do to stop him, no matter how much she worried. Suddenly, as Song passed by one of the club rooms, she heard faint moaning sounds coming from inside. Curious and slightly alarmed, she slowed her steps and peeked through the door. The shadows inside suggested that a couple was engaged in what looked like intense cardio training. For a brief moment, her mind jumped to the wrong conclusion, and she suspected it might be Kungo. Acting on impulse, she shouted and pushed the door open, only to realize that it was an entirely different couple inside. Shocked by her mistake, she immediately apologized and turned around to leave. However, she paused mid-step when she noticed that the couple appeared to be freshmen. Her expression hardened, and she sternly scolded them, ordering them to put their clothes back on immediately. She warned them to go home at once, or at least find a proper place, like a motel, instead of behaving so recklessly in a club room. At the same time, in another classroom, Kyouongo was hurriedly putting his clothes back on, his face flushed with panic. He was visibly flustered as he warned Kyouongo to dress quickly and leave before anyone noticed them. He insisted that if they were caught, it would turn into a serious problem. Kyouongo, however, seemed unbothered and casually reminded him that he himself had said there was nothing going on between him and Seng, so she did not understand why he was so anxious. Her words only irritated Kyouongo further. He raised his voice, telling her to stop talking nonsense and to hurry up and leave without arguing. Just then, Song entered the classroom. She looked around and found Kyouongo seated at his desk, calmly working on his assignments as if nothing unusual had happened. Slightly surprised, she commented that he was really doing his work so late at night. Kyouongo replied that he had already told her he planned to finish everything that night, so he did not understand why she had come all the way there. Sung smiled and offered him a cup of coffee. Kyouongo stared at it in confusion, clearly not expecting her to show up just to bring him a drink. Sung explained that she had added an extra shot to the coffee so he would not fall asleep while working. Kyouongo gave an awkward smile and lightly pushed her away, joking that if he was already so sleepy, they might as well go out for a drink instead. Sung calmly replied that they could drink right there. Still, Kyouongo insisted that they should go outside for some fresh air. As the two of them left the classroom together, Kyouongo quietly emerged from under the desk, relieved that she had not been discovered. Outside, Kyouongo and Song sat together, sipping their drinks in silence for a moment. Then Song casually brought up the incident she had just witnessed, asking whether Kyouongo had seen the freshmen earlier who were doing cardio training together. The question caught Kyouongo completely off guard, and he ended up spitting out his coffee in shock. Sung continued, remarking how fearless those students were to behave like that in a club room. Kyouongo responded with an awkward laugh, trying to hide his discomfort. Sung then added, almost teasingly, that it was the same room where Kyouongo had once done her own training session. Once again, Kyouongo choked on his coffee and spat out another sip. Annoyed, Sung scolded him, telling him to stop wasting coffee like that. Kyouongo defended himself, saying that she was the one talking about strange and embarrassing things. The conversation slowly shifted as Sung asked about his condition, gently bringing up the fact that he had recently been dumped by his girlfriend. Kyouongo admitted that their relationship had lasted 3 years, and even though it was painful, he believed that everything would eventually return to normal. Sung looked at him with concern and lightly hit his back in a playful yet encouraging way, reassuring him that things would be fine soon. She then wrapped an arm around Kyouongo and told him to cheer up. She promised that whenever things became too difficult, he could always come to her, and she would buy him a drink. Kyouongo agreed, smiling softly. Half jokingly, he asked what kind of mistakes they might end up making after getting drunk. The comment made Sung flustered and embarrassed. She quickly stood up, complaining that it suddenly felt too hot there, while Kyouongo sat back, giggling quietly at her reaction. Sung announced that she was leaving for the day, informing Kyouongo that she had to go and wishing him good luck with his upcoming assignments. Kyouongo expressed his gratitude politely, watching as she walked away. Once she was gone, the atmosphere around him felt heavier than before. Later that night, Kyouongo sat alone, drinking quietly while scrolling through the pictures of his ex-girlfriend on his phone. He let out a long sigh, murmuring bitterly that she should have taken some ugly photos of herself too. He thought that her beauty made it impossible for him to truly hate her, no matter how hard he tried. As he stared at the screen, memories resurfaced, moments when she had playfully asked him not to take her pictures when she wasn't wearing makeup. Those memories only made his chest ache more. Kyouongo mocked himself internally, thinking that she must be living happily now with her CEO boyfriend. He scolded himself for still looking at her photos, reminding himself that there was nothing left between them anymore. Overcome by emotion and alcohol, he impulsively called her. To his surprise, he answered. He confessed that he had called because he couldn't stop thinking about her. She immediately suspected that he was drunk, and Kyouongo admitted that he was heavily intoxicated, explaining that he had been drinking because he missed her too much. Concerned, she asked where he was. Kyouongo told her that he was at a convenience store. Moments later, she arrived. Without hesitation, she scolded him for drinking so much and losing control of himself. Kyouongo stared at her in shock, unable to believe that she was really standing in front of him. He softly called her name, Yeonhae. She told him firmly to wake up, saying that she was taking him home. As she supported him on the way, Kyouongo felt confused and disoriented. He kept wondering why she had come for him after everything that had happened between them. When they reached home, Yeonhae carefully placed him on the bed. In his drunken state, Kyouongo murmured apologies repeatedly. Yeonhae reassured him gently, telling him that it was fine and that he didn't need to worry anymore. However, suddenly, Kyouongo pulled her closer and kissed her. The next moment shattered everything. The girl beside him was not Yeonhae. It was Bora. Inside the house, Bora stood frozen in confusion as Kyouongo suddenly bowed down on the floor in front of her. In a state of panic and shame, he begged her to kill him, insisting that he deserved to die. He claimed he wouldn't make excuses and repeatedly demanded punishment. Bora, startled by his dramatic behavior, tried to calm him down and understand what had happened. Kyouongo apologized sincerely, saying that he remembered absolutely nothing from the previous night. Bora calmly told him that she wasn't angry in the way he was imagining. This response only confused Kyouongo further. Then, with a small smile, Bora invited him to have breakfast. She explained that after breakfast, he should go home and mentioned that she had prepared bean sprout soup especially for him. They sat together and ate. Kyouongo ate hesitantly, feeling extremely uncomfortable. He sensed that Bora might be slightly upset, even though she wasn't showing it openly. His mind raced with questions. How had he ended up at Bora's house? The embarrassment overwhelmed him so deeply that he felt like disappearing. Suddenly, Bora asked him whether he still loved his ex-girlfriend. Kyouongo hesitated, unable to answer immediately. Instead of pressing him, Bora smiled softly and told him to eat his food before it got cold. Later at the university, Sung entered the classroom and immediately noticed Kyouongo hitting his head lightly against the wall. He muttered to himself that the pain reflected his foolish actions. His thoughts felt scattered and heavy. He felt as if he were floating through life without control, being dragged along aimlessly, like a pebble spinning through the air or a rock that simply went wherever it was thrown, without thought or purpose. Sung sighed, commenting that Kyouongo truly had no brains. Kyouongo, already irritated, snapped back that he was serious this time. Sung stopped walking, turned toward him, and asked about his class, her tone shifting slightly. After some time, the two of them walked together. Kyouongo noticed that Sung had brought a rental car and felt confused about where she was taking him. When he questioned her, Sung told him to wait and see, assuring him that she was doing this to relieve his stress. She drove him to the seaside. Standing there, she explained that whenever she felt overwhelmed, she came to the sea. Looking at the endless water always made her realize that most of her worries were insignificant. She assured Kyouongo that he would feel better there too. At that moment, Kyouongo turned toward her, unexpectedly asked her to hit him. Without hesitation, Sung struck him hard in a sensitive area. Kyouongo immediately collapsed to the ground in pain. Sung quickly apologized, saying that she had assumed he would close his legs. Despite the pain, moments strangely broke the tension, leaving Kyouongo painfully aware, both physically and emotionally, of the chaos he had created for himself. Late at night, they finally arrived at Kyouongo's home with Sung. Exhausted but relieved, Kyouongo expressed his gratitude to her and assured her that he was already feeling much better. Sung, noticing the quiet awkwardness in the air, suggested they have a drink, remarking that leaving things as they were felt dull and unfinished. Kyouongo considered her words, and before long, the two of them ended up drinking together. As the alcohol settled in, Kyouongo's emotions began to spill out. He bitterly confessed that Sung probably thought he was pathetic. He spoke about the girl he had liked, Yeon, and how she had broken up with him. With graduation approaching next year, he admitted that he still had no clear goals or direction in life. To him, it felt inevitable that Yeon would leave. He described himself as a man without any qualities worth being proud of, and insisted that her decision to break up with him was obvious and justified. Repeating the word, if punishing himself, he called himself pathetic. Throughout his confession, Sung remained silent, listening without interruption. Suddenly, her restraint snapped. She raised her voice sharply, shouting at him not to mention that girl's name again, and ordering him to stop calling himself worthless. Her sudden aggression caught Kyouongo off guard. He asked her almost sincerely what she believed he was actually good at. Sung paused, thinking hard. After a moment, she awkwardly blurted out that his physical endowment was impressive. Immediately realizing she had nothing else to add, she faltered, then quickly said that it did not matter whether he had obvious strengths or not. She was certain that someone would eventually recognize his worth. Unsatisfied, Kyouongo stepped closer and quietly asked what he truly did right. Without warning, Sung grabbed his face, startling him. He explained that he was only asking out of curiosity. Nervously, he shifted the topic and asked whether he had done well during their cardio training sessions. He wanted to know if he had performed correctly. Sung slapped him and scolded him, asking what kind of idiot would ask such a question. Trying again, Kyouongo brought up the time they played basketball, comparing it to the same kind of closeness, and asked if he had made her uncomfortable. This time Sung answered more calmly, admitting that it had actually been good. Kyouongo wondered silently whether she truly felt that way. Seeing the seriousness in his expression, Sung grew curious herself. Hesitantly, she confessed that it had been the first time anyone had ever touched her in those places. She admitted that the experience had been incredible, stimulating, exciting, and unlike anything she had felt before. She explained that it was something she could not experience on her own, and that in the moment, they had both been enjoying it. Then, Sung turned the question back on him and asked how it had felt for him. Kyouongo only smiled and said that he had no intention of telling her. His refusal irritated her instantly. She grabbed him by the collar and demanded that he tell her right away. Eventually, Kyouongo gave in and shared his experience honestly. After that intense exchange, the two of them ended up continuing their workout session together as if nothing unusual had happened. Meanwhile, Gyeong entered the classroom the next day and noticed that Kyouongo was absent. Before she could think much about it, a few girls called out to her. Gyeong greeted them warmly, mentioning that it had been a long time since she had last seen them. One of the girls seemed surprised to see her, assuming that Gyeong had already completed her homework. Gyeong replied that she had actually come to meet Kyouongo and asked about his whereabouts. The girl answered that she did not think Kyouongo would be coming that day. Although surprised, Gyeong simply smiled and thanked her. After Gyeong left, the two girls began whispering among themselves, wondering if she might like Kyouongo. However, they quickly dismissed the idea, reasoning that someone as popular as Gyeong would never go after someone like him. The girl with glasses then announced that she was leaving and called out to her friend, Jin. Jin agreed and followed her, but her thoughts lingered on the previous night. She remembered witnessing Gyeong and Kyouongo during their cardio training. While she could accept that Gyeong, as a senior, had that side to her, she had never expected Kyouongo to be the same. Letting out a quiet sigh, she reminded herself that it had nothing to do with her and that she should focus on returning to work. The next morning at the university, Sung walked across campus when the memory of her wrestling-like encounter with Kyouongo the night before suddenly resurfaced. Shocked by her own thoughts, she quickly covered her mouth and scolded herself for thinking about such things so early in the morning. Just then, her professor called out to her. She greeted him politely, and he asked her to fetch some clay from the storage room, explaining that he was short-handed at the moment. Sung asked how much was needed, and the professor replied that 2 packs would be enough. Sung had been warned that the boxes in the storage room would be heavy and that she might need an extra pair of hands. However, she responded with a confident smile, insisting that she was stronger than she looked and fully capable of handling the task on her own. With that assurance, she made her way toward the storage room. Once inside, Sung positioned a stool beneath her feet and carefully climbed up to reach the boxes stacked above. As she began lifting them, she muttered that they were much heavier than she had anticipated. At that moment, her foot slipped on the stool, and she nearly lost her balance. Just as she was about to fall, Kyouongo appeared from behind and caught her in time, preventing any serious injury. Startled but relieved, Sung steadied herself while Kyouongo immediately asked if she was hurt. She quickly reassured him that she was fine and then questioned why he was there. Kyouongo explained that Professor Park had instructed him to assist her with the task. After that, an awkward silence settled between them, lingering longer than either of them expected. Breaking the tension, Sung commented that it was actually a good thing Kyouongo was there, considering how heavy the boxes were. She added that he seemed strong enough to handle the rest by himself, which was why she intended to leave. As she turned to go, Kyouongo suddenly reached out and grabbed her hand. He confessed that what had happened the previous night was still vivid in his mind. Although Singh had told him to treat it lightly, as if they had simply played basketball together, he admitted that he could not bring himself to do that. He acknowledged that it sounded irrational and clarified that he was not implying anything disrespectful about her. Still, he confessed that he wanted more, even if he knew it was complicated. Soon after, the two resumed their workout session together inside the storage room, their emotions simmering beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Doyeon approached Professor Park to ask for extra keys. The professor informed her that the storage room was currently unlocked, as he had sent some juniors to retrieve clay. Curious, Doyeon entered the storage room and was shocked to see Kyouongo and Sung engaged in what appeared to be a wrestling match. Hearing a noise, Kyouongo stepped outside and came face to face with Miss Doyeon Cha. He looked visibly confused. Shortly afterward, Sung also emerged, casually explaining that the easel must have fallen on its own and that no one else was inside. She then announced that she was leaving. Kyouongo volunteered to take the clay back to the classroom. During the lecture, Professor Cha informed the class that next time they would be using the artwork they had submitted as reference material for sculpting. The students were free to use any tools, materials, or techniques they preferred. As Kongo listened, he found himself worrying that Professor Cha might have seen them during their cardio training earlier. Professor Cha suddenly called Kongo's name and complimented him on the quality of the artwork he had submitted. Kongo thanked her respectfully. Shortly after, a girl wearing glasses invited Professor Cha to join the MT the following day, and the professor agreed. Kongo appeared confused upon hearing that the MT was scheduled for tomorrow. Pyongsin, sounding irritated, commented that there seemed to be no interest or appreciation for the effort that had gone into planning the event. The girl with glasses called out to him, and upon hearing her voice, Pyongsin immediately softened, smiling as he asked why she had called him by name. She explained that she was collecting the MT fee and pointed out that Pyongsin was the only one who had not paid yet. Pyongsin asked if she was certain, and she confirmed it by mentioning Kongo's name, stating that he had already paid. With that clarification, it became clear that Pyongsin was the last remaining person who still owed the fee. The next day, everyone gradually settled into their seats on the bus, the air filled with low chatter and lingering sleepiness. As Sung moved toward Kongo, intending to sit beside him, Gyeong suddenly called out to her from behind. With an easy confidence, Gyeong explained that she wanted the seat next to Kongo instead, mentioning casually that she preferred sitting on the aisle. Before Sung could fully respond, Gyeong stepped forward with a warm smile, thanked her politely, and took the seat beside Kongo. Sung attempted to object, but it was already too late. Gyeong had made herself comfortable. Internally, Kongo felt conflicted. He had hoped to sit next to Sung, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Gyeong, seemingly cheerful and energetic, soon suggested taking a picture together. Kongo, however, refused without much explanation, his tone calm but firm. Just then, Pyongsin grabbed the microphone at the front of the bus and made an enthusiastic announcement. He declared that everyone had been working tirelessly, completing one assignment after another, and proclaimed that this trip was meant for bonding. With exaggerated excitement, he shouted that they should drink until there were no survivors, drawing laughter and groans from the group. Almost immediately, Hyeon approached him, demanding a participation fee, adding to the chaotic humor of the moment.